When I was a little boy, like most kids, non Christian families, you teach your kids that Santa Claus is real, that Santa Claus is working all year real hard up on the North Pole, and he's got a whole labor force of elves, and they're taking orders and taking letters from your parents based on whether you've been bad or good. It's a global initiative, it's a global operation. And the night before Christmas, Santa's going to hit every single house in the world and drop off some presents to every family in the world, to every child, every boy and girl. And there's a song that says he knows when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. When I was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old, I still remember having this conversation with my mom. I said, Mom, I remember asking her a series of questions as a child. I said to her, "You're telling me, Mom, based on that song, that he knows how we're behaving, like good or bad?" Yes. Okay, so he can hear everything that we're saying. All the kids in the world, he can hear everything that we say, yes or no. She said, yes. He knows if you've been bad or good. He knows what you're saying, how you're behaving, whether you're obeying your parents or not obeying your parents. And then I said, okay, Mom, so if that's true, that he can hear everything we're saying and all the kids in the world can be heard at the same time, isn't the world a really loud place for him? Hearing millions upon millions, hundreds of millions of voices around the world all at the same time. Isn't the world a loud place for him? And I still remember the confounded look that my mother had on her face when I said that, because she didn't know what to say. When you pastor someone, you hear God with and for them, just like parents, when they walk with the Lord, they hear God with and for their kids. Christine and I raised three boys together. Kevin is our oldest. He's my stepson. He was 10 when 9, about to turn 10 when Christine and I got married. We had Joseph a year later, Joel 5 years later. So the boys are pretty well spread out in age. I can go back with each boy and just pull out specific situations of when the Lord spoke to his mom and to me specifically, about each boy. What they were called to do, what they should be doing, how to discipline them, how to disciple them, what they were called to do in the seasons as they were becoming teenagers, how to help them grow and develop, what doors to help open for them, what relationships to encourage them in, what relationships to discourage them from participating in, both male and female, sports, activities, Boy Scouts, Jiu-Jitsu, Taekwondo, uh, FFA, Future Farmers of America, animal husbandry, uh, work, jobs. I can just sit here for hours and hours and tell you stories about how the Lord had Christine and I, and more specifically me, as they got older, engaged with each boy in helping him to develop into the young man that God had called him to be. I can tell you it's a lot of work. Raising kids God's way, doing it the right way, it's a ton of work. It's a ton of work. It's very involved. God is very detailed in his strategies in the lives of kids. raising them, rearing them, discipling them, mentoring them. He's very detailed in this focus that he has through us into their lives. And with that comes a lot of interactive language between you as the parent and the Lord, because you are, in effect, really the ones that are pastoring them. You're the ones that are actually shepherding them. It's not some other guy. And yes, I do believe in secondary and tertiary voices. As a side note, if it's one thing I learned as a high school teacher for 2 years teaching Spanish, actually 3 years, if it's one thing I learned as a teacher in schools when we got back from Mexico, is that it really helps if you have people that come in behind you and confirm and water all the seed that you've been sowing in your kids since before they were born, while they were still in their mother's womb. The praying that you've done over them, the hearing that you've done for them, the speaking that you've done into their lives, the discipline, the discipleship, the walking in paths of deliverance. You can't do that all on your own. It does require Paul planting seed, Apollos watering it, and God making it grow. That's in 1 Corinthians, I believe, 1st or 2nd Corinthians. I planted seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow. When I was a high school teacher, the one thing I learned was the value of having teachers, coaches, other ministers confirming in my sons, jiu-jitsu coaches, taekwondo coaches and instructors. I needed other men confirming in the lives of my sons the very thing that I had been trying to raise up in them for years. And so in no way am I undermining or devaluing anything that goes on outside of the primary care of the parent. But the parent is the primary caretaker, the primary seed sower, the primary shepherd in the process of raising a child. Period. And I say all that to say it's a very involved process in hearing God. And I don't know how you could have 40, 50, 100, 200, 300 kids and be an effective parent. You can't do it. I'm all for big families. I don't believe in birth control. I think people should have as many kids as God gives them. And if that's 10 kids, 12, I know families that have 10 or 12 kids. I think it's in Christ. I think it's amazing. And I think you should do it. Christine and I never used birth control. The Lord gave us 4 children. 3 boys and a little girl who passed away. We absolutely do. We believe with all of our hearts the Lord showed us to have all the kids, to open our lives up and to let Him determine exactly how many kids we were going to have, when, boy, girl, the age separation. Let Him do the work. We needed to be faithful to each other in our marriage, have as many kids as He would give us. And those were the children that He gave us. And if for you it's 2, praise God. If it's 12, praise God. Have all the kids that God wants to give you. And in that process, the father and the mother, they are the primary shepherds in that process of raising those kids in the Lord. And it requires a lot of hearing God with and for the child, with and for the child, with and for the child, until they grow into their own faith, which by my observation usually starts somewhere around 15 years old. 14, 15, they really start to mature into their own faith. They really start to hear God on their own. And you're just there as a guidance system to try to help give it some shape and form and to keep them from stepping too far off the path, feeling conviction, getting back on it. And with all that said, I don't see how you could do it for more than 10 or 12 people. It's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. What does this mean for the ministry? Apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Ephesians chapter 4, turn there and look at it. It was he who gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some to be evangelists, pastors, and teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service. I believe all 5 gifts are in play. I believe the Lord has fully restored the apostolic gift in our generation, and I believe the Lord has mandated a developmental process in certain lives of certain men to be prepared to do apostolic works. And I believe that for the prophetic gift, the prophetic office, I absolutely 1000% believe that. And in that, as he's restoring the apostolic and the prophetic gifting in our generation, I do believe he's restoring proper structure to the pastoral gift and how that functions in the lives of people. It's been my observation and my experience that just like raising kids, I don't think it's even possible to hear God with and for more than maybe 5 to 7 men who are really in a growth spurt. I don't think it's possible. I'm going to give you some examples of what I'm talking about. I'll give you one in particular. In 2012, we had returned to the United States from Mexico, and my boys were taking Taekwondo at a particular place in Granbury where we lived. And I'm going to call this young man Darren. It's not his real name. Darren was a young guy. He's 15 years younger than me. So at that time, I was 42. So he was 27 when I first met him. He was the boys' Taekwondo instructor. Handsome young man, very energetic, newly married, didn't have kids yet, was about to have his first child with his wife. And they went to a church called Stonewater there in town. Stonewater, in my mind, is a mega church. When you have a county, Hood County is 60,000 people. At that time, Hood County had 60,000 people. The population has probably doubled or tripled by now. At that time, Hood County had 60,000 people. I believe the county had 70 churches in its registry, and 3,000 to 4,000 of those people went to Stonewater. And Darren and his wife, they went to Stonewater. Tons of people that we knew did. And they received him. They started getting him, from what I remember, they started getting him involved in their youth ministry because he fit the profile. Young, good looking, high energy, available, ministry ambitions maybe. So they started bringing him in. And next thing you know, I think he was maybe doing a little bit of ministry and preaching, or it was getting close to that point where they were about to start bringing him in. They had their own seminary inside their church. And I think he went to their seminary. And we had been back in Granbury for maybe 6 months from Mexico. The boys had been taking martial arts. And one day, it was in the summer, it was in 2012, probably around July. We were at home one Sunday afternoon, and I was doing a Bible study with Joseph, my middle son. And specifically, we were studying Proverbs 2, 6, and 10. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. I remember reading that verse specifically with Joseph. And we were sitting on our couch, and I remember as a backdrop, I was looking out the back door, the sliding glass door that we lived on the lake. And while I was reading this verse with Joseph, the Lord literally interrupted me and said, Darren has an apostolic calling. I heard it as clear as day. So I wrote it down, and I immediately began to think, okay, so Lord, why are you talking to me about him? What's the reason? Because normally you never say anything to anyone without purpose. There's always a purpose. So I just began to assume that this was a piece of mail that the Lord wanted me to deliver to Darren. So from that day forward, every time I took the boys to martial arts, I began to look for an opportunity to engage with Darren. Now, at that time, I didn't know him very well. And we had had a couple of passing conversations. He knew that we'd been in full-time ministry. He knew we'd come back from Mexico. He knew a little bit of that backstory. And every time I saw him from that point forward, I did everything I could to try to get close to him, to engage with him, to get set up in a conversation with him, to begin to talk to him about what I had heard. And every time from that day forward for about a month, I would go begin to move in his direction, lean in, and someone would cut in. The door would close. Couldn't get close to him, couldn't get a conversation going, couldn't get past the hello, how are you, what's going on. He was always either in too much of a hurry or there were too many people around. It was just, the moment was never set up for us to really connect. And so it was happening so consistently that I started to actually wonder if I was supposed to share this with him at all. And I'm asking myself, why did you say this to me, Lord? I mean, I'm doing the best that I can to deliver the mail, and I can never get squared up on him. And I said to the Lord, if you want me to sit down and talk with him about what I believe you told me about him, because that's a ministry calling, I need you to set it up, because I can't get anywhere near him. It's like he's got some type of angelic Secret Service detail around him. And every time I go to lean in, I've got someone pushing me back, someone I can't see. I need you to set this up. That's what I said to the Lord. So I took that word and I put it on the shelf and I tested it with time. And I went about my business, and several months, I say several, it was probably 3 or 4 months goes by. I think we were in about the month October. And one day I get a text message on my phone from Darren. He had, I guess, pulled my phone number off the information sheet for the boys at the studio. That's how he got a hold of it. And he texted me and he said, "Hey, Jay, it's Darren." He said, he says, "I'd really like to meet with you." He says, "I've been praying about someone to disciple me personally. And I feel like God has shown me that you're the one to do it." I'm reading my phone and I'm thinking, okay. I've been carrying this word with me for 3 or 4 months. I guess it's kind of simmered down and cooled off, I'm in a place where I can take it or leave it. And that's usually the best place to be when you're getting ready to walk through an open door, is that if God said step back, you're good with it. I wasn't emotionally charged with it. It was, and because of that, I was ready to give it. So we met at Chick-fil-A right there on Highway 377. We sat down, we set up a time to meet. I was teaching Spanish at Cornerstone Christian Academy. And I met him one day for lunch, and I left campus, and we sat down in front of each other, and we're just kind of making small talk at one of the tables. And I just said, Darren, do you know who you are? Do you know what God's made you to be? And he just kind of looked at me, and he didn't have a real clear answer. And I said, well, I'm glad you called me, and I'm glad we're meeting, because the Lord has been talking to me about you. And I began to share with him what I felt like the Lord showed me. And of course, at that time, he had no idea what I was saying. He didn't understand the gift. And he just kind of looked at me a little bit wide-eyed and didn't know really how to process some of what I was saying to him. And I said, well, I want to walk with you. And let's just kind of see where the Lord takes this whole thing. And in the course of a year, the Lord really began to give me all of the words that helped him to begin to make a very specific journey that he was supposed to be on, a very specific path. And the Lord began to speak to me about him as if a father would speak to a son. Now, there was only 15 years between us, but the Lord began to give me a caretaker's heart for him in a way that no one else had. And he would often tell me, he said, he says, they promoted him at this big church. They promoted him, put him on staff, started putting him up in front of the entire congregation before he was ready. They had him ministering in the youth program. They had him ministering literally on Sundays as part of the revolving team of preachers on Sunday. And this kid was not ready. He didn't have the maturity for it. He had some marriage issues he had to sort through. He didn't have the language, all this stuff up here. He didn't have the language. He didn't have the doctrine yet. He was a believer. He'd been water baptized. He'd not yet experienced the Spirit baptism with signs following. He was a babe in the Lord, and he was the last person that you would want to stick up on stage, on top of the fact that he was an aspiring actor in years prior. He had actually moved to California and was trying to break into the Hollywood scene and had to return home to help his dad in his business because his dad started having health problems. Well, that was God's way of getting him out of California. And he had confided in me several times that he knew he had a tendency to memorize a script and act it out without it. And in that process, he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. And he was afraid that was going to carry over into the ministry. He actually said that to me. Well, that's good discernment, because that was exactly what the enemy was tempting him with. And when they were prematurely promoting him, have you ever seen that at work or in ministry where someone gets a promotion before they're ready? Have you ever been offered a promotion before you were ready? Have you ever seen someone have kids before they were ready? Like they got married before they were ready to be married and they married the wrong person? Have you ever seen that? Well, the church does this to young kids all the time. They prematurely promote them when they're not ready. And they identified him and they began to bring him into their system because He was a local businessman. He knew a lot of people because of the studio, the Taekwondo studio. And he was very likable. Handsome guy, made a good appearance, was a good public speaker. He just happened to be very immature. They didn't seem to have a problem with that because they could manipulate him and control him. That's what 2 Peter chapter 2 says. They entice people from those who are just escaping from those who live in error. Manipulative men, they love immature believers. They love exploiting the immature. I warned him about this. I said, really, you kind of have two paths in front of you. You can either take the apostolic route, which is going to require a season in the desert, a long season of being in Potiphar's house in the prison, a long season of, like David, being on the run from Saul and being trained to be a king, like Joseph being trained to be prime minister of Egypt. I said, I can tell you in apostolic preparation, you have got to go through long seasons of preparation that will far outweigh anything you ever do in the ministry, that form the foundation and the basis of your character, your doctrine, your development, your gifting development, how and when to use what gifts, your warfare development, how and when to use certain spiritual warfare tactics. You're going to go through a decade or more of distress and development. Just like Paul went to Arabia and then went to Antioch for years of preparation, 17, I think it was, 15 or 17. Just like Joseph, that was sold into slavery, went to Potiphar's house at 17 and then was sent to prison until he was 30. Just like David, that went on the run for his life, where he said there's literally one step between him and death at the hands of Saul trying to kill him, and then going through long years of preparation and only ruling over Judah for 6 years, I think, and 6 months before he actually became king over all the tribes. How old was he? Was it 30? There's these long seasons of development that take at least a decade or more. And you, young man, Darren, you need to embrace that. That's what I told him. I said before you this day, life and death, choose life. You can either take the bait and get on staff and start preaching before you're ready in your own strength. The Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians, I may not be a trained speaker, but I do have knowledge. I said, right now you've got to decide whether you just want to be a trained speaker who's spewing out a script, or you can go into the desert and gain, like Paul, gain the knowledge that the Lord wants you to have, so that when it comes time for the Lord to flip that switch and turn you on and turn you loose against the kingdom of darkness, you'll be ready. Graham Cook said you can either wait on God and go through your seasons of distress and development, or you can rush ahead and destroy with your character what you build with a gift. You can either wait on God, or you can rush ahead and destroy with your character, lack thereof, bad character, what you build with a gift. Because the giftings and callings of God are irrevocable. Balaam was a prophet, and he prophesied oracles over Israel. He had no character. The minister, Ernest Gentile, when I watched him preach with David Schock at that prophetic presbytery at Church 236, that Sunday he said something I'll never forget. Ernest Gentile at that time was probably 70 years old and had been in full-time ministry for decades. And he stood up in front of our congregation and said to the congregation, in all his years of ministry, if it's one thing he's learned, is that most guys that are in the ministry today were never called. What they're doing They were never called to it. He said it was his prophetic observation. He had a prophetic ministry. He said in his observation, most of the guys that are in ministry today, in the capacity that they're functioning, they were never called to that. When I was pastoring Darren, I felt like I was in a constant tug of war with the institutional system that he was a part of. The biggest church in the county, probably the biggest church, you'd have to go to Fort Worth to find a bigger church. Arguably the biggest church within 200 or 300 miles, maybe outside of Fort Worth. I'm not even sure if there was a church in Fort Worth that was that big. 4,000 people. Huge church. And they kept reeling him in and courting him in and propping him up and putting him up there. And I kept kind of, are you sure you're ready for this? And I saw within him this internal war and this struggle of personal ambition or obeying the Lord. Personal ambition or obeying the Lord. This was a real pastoral assignment that the Lord gave me. It was no different than raising a son. And he was learning the script from me because what I was sowing into his life on a personal basis for him was actually working. I was teaching him how to hear the voice of God. And it was working. I was getting phone calls, text messages at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. The Lord would have him up in the middle of the night. And the Lord would be talking to him. And then he would come to me with his notebook full of notes, pictures that the Lord would give him, and he would show them to me, and he would say, look at these. What do you see? And I would look them over, and some of it I think was definitely from the Lord. Some of it was him fleshing things out. Maybe it wasn't real clear. But when you have kids, you don't really focus on, while they're working out their salvation in fear and trembling, you just kind of let them go and figure out their own mistakes in some areas. And I felt like for him, the tug of war that he was in between me and the institutional system, because they refused to acknowledge me for the role I had in his life. The Lord was talking to me about him, and he actually said that to me. He said, if there's anything good that's been sown into my life, he says it hasn't come from anyone on the pastoral staff at that church. He said, it's all come from you. Well, then why are you listening to them? Because they had an opportunity in public speaking, in public recognition, in vain glory that I could not give him. And he took the bait. And over the course of time, it wore him down. He kept entertaining false opportunities, and it eventually destroyed him. He ended up losing his marriage. Long story, I won't even get into all of it. It took about 3 or 4 years to materialize. And I saw it coming. Because he wouldn't take the path that the Lord gave him to take out into the desert. I was pastoring him, not those guys. I was the one that the Lord was speaking to about him, not those guys. I was the one that was pastoring him, not those guys. Because everything that they offered him destroyed him. He did not need to be up there preaching on Sundays. He wasn't ready. He was not ready. He was a decade or more away from being ready. He had things he needed to clean up in his marriage. He just did not need the opportunities that they were bestowing upon him. I say all this to say, I know how much work went into that. In addition to raising my own 2 sons, Kevin was out of the house by then, but having Joseph in middle school and Joel in elementary school, being married. I don't see how I could have performed that role that I did in Darren's life. I don't see how I could have done it in more than 4 or 5 guys' lives. I don't see how you can be that involved with. We were meeting for lunch 2 to 3 days a week because that's what it took to get him going. That's what it takes to get people going. When you pastor people, your phone is on all the time. When you pastor people, you need to meet them for lunch at least twice a week. When you pastor people, you need to be on the phone with them at least twice a week. I mean, on long conversations. You pray for them every day. You hear God for them or are available to hear God for them every day. And this goes on for 2 or 3 years, depending on the depth of their defilement. If you get someone that's got a lot of roots to pull up, a lot of weeds in their garden, they are very defiled through sexual immorality, drugs, alcohol, witchcraft, all the things that are available to people today at the click of a button. It can take you a long time to get that person turned around, and the level of involvement that it takes in order to turn that ship around and to get it sailing and into deep blue waters, it's a 2 to 3 year job to get them really upright and fully functioning and fully healthy. It doesn't mean that you won't see significant process in a month or two if they fully submit, because they will have significant growth. You will have some significant growth if you submit, regardless of how many demonic roots you've got to pull up. It'll start happening day one, but it is a long process. In pastoring someone, you can't hear God on that level with and for 300 people. Can't. Cannot be done. It cannot be done. You are not Santa Claus. You're not Santa Claus. You don't know when they're sleeping. You don't know when 300 people are awake. You don't know when 300, 500, 1,000 people are bad or good. You can't hear God with and for that many people. You cannot hear God with and for in detail in the growth stages of their life. You cannot do that for 100 people. It is impossible. Pastoral ministry in the modern American system, and this system is being exported globally to countries that don't have physical persecution. I know because I've seen it. This model of pastoral ministry is broken. It does not give care to people on the level that they need it. It does not give prophetic insight to people on the level that they need it. It doesn't teach and pastor on the level that people need it. It doesn't counsel and pastor on the level that people need it. It does not walk people through spiritual deliverance from demonic spirits on the level that people need. It's inadequate. It doesn't work. It's a Protestant priest system. It's a Santa Claus system. It doesn't work. It's a demon-infested system. Religious spirits, Jezebel spirits, charismatic chaos, Nicolaitanism, bully spirits, lording over people. It's a system that values the 99 over the 1. The 99 people that are the least troublemakers and are the wealthiest, and that tithe the most consistently. It is not a real pastoral system. This whole American church structure has evolved into something beyond anything that I believe God is an architect of. And right now, he's restoring the apostolic gift to set all the other gifts back in order. Apostles, prophets, evangelists, real pastoral ministry, real teaching, how the elders really function, how the gifts really flow, all of this apostolic doctrine right here. He's restoring apostolic doctrine right now, globally. And progressively, it's in conflict with this artificial system that does not pasture people. I'm getting ready to get into the long story of the last year and a half, and I can tell you some of the things that I heard while I was there, just being involved in the brief snippets of men's ministry. No, this isn't pastoral care. It's Santa Claus. It's fake. It's made up. It's not real. It's not real pastoral care. I've seen it firsthand. It's just like raising boys. I skipped the story on my father's funeral. I'm going to skip it for now. I felt like this is really where I needed to go. I tried to make that video and it just wouldn't come out of my mouth. And I felt like what I needed to do was to give some testimony of what real pastoral ministry is. And I'll probably give a couple more along the way. Maybe. We'll see. I would say most believers do not have any idea what real pastoral care is. They know some snippets of it here and there, but I don't think that most American believers even really know what pastoring is. I just don't think they have any clue because it's never been available to them. There's a war between the house of Saul and the house of David right now. The house of David is rising. We're in a long, protracted battle between the house of Saul and the house of David. And the house of Saul is going to grow weaker and weaker, and the house of David is going to grow stronger and stronger until Christ returns.